Welcome back to the Pre-Vetted podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, we are joined by Bryan Wish. He's CEO of ArcBound, where he helps leaders clarify an ownable message and turn it into content, relationships, and real opportunities. Bryan also co-founded Graviten.ai, a SaaS platform designed to help firms scale compliant, measurable personal brand growth across sales team starting in the mortgage industry. He's the host of the One Away podcast, and earlier in his career, he built Wishdish, a platform built around sharing personal stories and live storytelling events. Bryan, welcome to the show.
What a bio. Good job, team. No one ever picks up on Wish Dish days, but yeah, that was the early storytelling journey. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're honored to have you today. Tell us a little bit more about Wishdish before we move to your other projects.
Yeah, so I was in college and I was at that phase of life where I wasn't super interested in going out to the parties anymore. And I also didn't want to just get a job after school. And I thought that I wanted to find meaning at the intersection of work and life from a pretty young age. And so I started to think about purpose a lot earlier. And I started to think about self expression as a medium to make an impact on other people. This was 2015. And this was the time where you're seeing all the WordPress blogs come out and, the WordPress.com with like your name on it. And people were starting these personal platforms and they were just sharing. And it was one of those things where someone did this and they never kept up with it. It was like, oh yeah, here's my blog and my first post on this. And then you never heard from them again. I was in a period where I'd just gone through a pretty large transformation over the summer of 2014, where I was doing a lot of personal work on myself, working with a coach, and just started seeing the world a little differently. And so I wanted to share some of those learnings as I came out of this cocoon state. And I didn't feel like I had a platform and a place to do that. And so I wanted to create a way for other people. So when I started looking, so I wanted to share. I was looking at the landscape of how people were sharing, and I didn't want to just go into, the way that everyone else. And so to me, the red ocean is creating a platform for a collective group of people to be able to share together, and be able to have a voice in a platform where you could have hundreds of people, thousands all around, a vulnerable story. And by putting that out there, have an impact on other people for the better. And that was the intention behind it. And yeah, it was an amazing journey. And I learned so much about media and content and community. And I forgot about how to make money doing that. But it was a soulful project and led me down so many avenues. It was awesome. And I took a lot of the learnings from it in the future life.
Amazing. Amazing. Very interesting. And then after that, many years later, you're now leading ArcBound and co-founded Graviten, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about ArcBound and what you're doing. What services are you offering there?
Yeah. So 8 years ago, I was doing a book launch for an author in Washington, D.C. His name was Alan Gannett, and he was coming out with a book called The Creative Curve. And Alan said to me, come run my book launch. That was a full course, step into building out a personal brand for someone. So helping define his message around creativity, build out the website with him and the team. I saw his LinkedIn and newsletter and videos and all these things that he was doing to market himself on the platform, to drive distribution and, create opportunities as he was selling his business. And I was at a front row seat to all of it, managing it. And so from learning how to create great content, working alongside him, to learning how to set up events and PR for him, I had this front row seat into what it took to build a personal brand. And there was so much friction in that process, right? So, we had 4 or 5 different vendors. He was paying me full time. And I thought, this was amazing. I learned so much. But to string all this together with these different types of people, it's a lot of friction. And I wanted to create an easier way for people to like stand up their brand and like have a platform to be able to do it. And so that was the birth of ArcBound. Because he said to me at the end of that project, "What do you want to do next?" And I said, "I want to create a better system for this to come to life." And so that's ArcBound. Over the last 7 years, we've built up all the service infrastructure. So people come to us to define who they are and how they show up in the world and the brand like behind, who they are and what they represent. And then we build out, their brand system across the channels, LinkedIn, newsletters, podcasts, short form video across YouTube, TikTok, all the platforms. And I have really created a nice infrastructure for people's voice and passions to land to drive and accelerate opportunities forward. And so it's been amazing who we've been able to work with, hard founder lessons I've learned along the way. And it's led us to some more expansive pastures, from all this learning.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, I think that it's a whole different game when you're doing personal brand than it is a company brand, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about Graviten.ai.
Yeah. So, when you're banging your head against the wall for 7 years trying to get a company off the ground, and you finally take the time to look up and kind of step away and maybe like let go of like the tight grip you have on the company, I got to a point where I was like, do I still want to do what we're doing? The answer was yes. But I started to look out, do I at this like linear trajectory or, even if there's good velocity, is it the right way to do it? And the answer to me at that time was no. I didn't want to work this hard for the next 10 years in this way, given like what I could see. And so I started to think about, well, okay, if not this way, what's the right way? And my intuition kind of led me to thinking about these enterprises in mortgage banking and insurance and wealth management, where there's hundreds of sales leaders and sales professionals under a corporate umbrella that are all really their own brand, but powered by the corporate back end that's making like their business possible. And so what I did was I approached a client of ours named Tim Springer, and Tim in a previous life had built a digital accessibility company to $100 million in annual recurring revenue. And he's a technologist and
Wow.
builder. And, I said to Tim, hey, I need to come fly to see you. And he was a client at the time. And I said to him, I have some ideas that I think are worth sharing. And he said, come on down. He lives in Newport Beach. So I flew down. I sent him a night before. I sent him an email the night before of this idea to go into these organizations to build this out. And he said to me, look, these are two separate businesses. One's a software layer and then one's a services layer. And we're going to build we're going to build infrastructure if this works that can really allow us to scale into an organization. And then we'll use the services layer to fulfill on some of the things that are necessary. And so before like agreeing to work with me, he said, go interview a bunch of people and get back to me on what you find. And so I took that upon myself to go interview dozens and dozens and dozens of sales professionals, CEOs, marketing leaders across these industries to just validate our hypothesis. Like, were we right? And what we uncovered was of massive problems. And, just to build on this, what they were is, you have these sales professionals. They don't want to pay thousands of dollars a month to have a brand because it's coming out of their own pocket mostly.
Right.
And if they do take the time to do this, right? Like it's DIY and it's not good. It's not compliant. Um, and it's not consistent. And it's hard to do on an ongoing basis just by yourself. And the marketing leaders, right? They're really stuck because they're trying to scale hundreds of people across an organization on very limited resources, and they have corporate objectives. They have their ad hoc agency to these people. They're running around like they're chicken with their heads cut off, and it's very inefficient. And like it's very clear there's problems on both sides. Now, the unspoken problem, which is even more interesting, is these companies are no different from the person to their left and right, nor are their salespeople. So they have problems with retention and recruiting and saying this is why we're different. And so now if you have a marketing system that's helping their individuals brand who they are, you're solving a problem on the marketing side, the sales side, and now helping with recruiting and retention. And so I think it's a very interesting problem. And so as we came back with all of these insights from these interviews, that's when, Tim was like, let's partner on this journey and let's build a company. Now he's a partner across both businesses. It's an exciting time. We've streamlined the service infrastructure to make the price point much more accessible, and we're rolling out the software infrastructure with our first enterprise customer in April. So it's an exciting time. I think, it probably, there were a lot of dark moments a few years ago that I think have led to this. And this thing just was like, oh yeah, everything's going great. And then this idea came. Like you kind of had to get to a place of rawness to start to look at the future differently. So yeah, that's the backstory.
Right, right. So you build Graviten based on all the experiences of ArcBound. And I think that I find interesting is that you were able to interview a lot of people and understand, truly understand what the problems are. Because usually what happens is, and this is kind of the lean startup philosophy, right? Build what is a minimum viable product to validate your assumptions, right? And the interviews is kind of the first step, right? And I committed the sin of building without validating and then realizing that it's not exactly what people need, right? Or it's not solving people's problems, right? So I think that that's an amazing journey, right?
Yeah, it's been a very lean approach for how we've done it. And to your point, yeah, it would have been hard to do the inverse. It would have been hard to go to the enterprise and say we need to go brand all these people and not back it up with experience of how we've done it. And it's a completely different types of business and the kind of sales process, but it's a completely different type of what you're doing. But it is a very lean approach and a very modular design for how we're doing it. In time, like as the scale, there'll need a ton of, I think, engineering support behind it. But right now, it's you're right, taking the core insights, building the best things that the company needs, and then kind of expanding out the platform from there.
Right. Right. How much of overlap do you think it is between one company and the other, and how much do you think is unique in each?
I mean, look, I think one's a technology infrastructure and one's a services business, right? Services
Right.
business informed how the technology platform is being built. But I see them as two businesses that have been informed by one another. And right now, you know, they're separate. And if it becomes a point in time where it makes sense to merge them, we can merge them. But for right now, the cleanest thing to do is just have two separate companies. And honestly, the process of that has been great because instead of trying to like muddy the waters and like try and fit something into a pre-existing thing, like separating the ideas out has actually made it so clear of like what a future state could look like that I don't think would have been possible just trying to do it all together. So, I think Tim's a very deliberate thinker, very structured, very like thoughtful and expansive in his like vision, but also pragmatic. And I think that's very helpful for someone like me who might be able to see 10 years out, but might struggle in just the day to day of certain elements of business. And so building a great team with what we have is, I think, helped clarify how this all works.
Amazing. Amazing. Very interesting. So when you talk about finding an ownable message, what
Yeah.
that does mean?
All right. Federico, tell me about you. Tell me about who you are, what you stand for. Like, I mean, we can do this role play, right? Like, give me some
Okay.
background on you.
Yeah. So I'm a software engineer turning to founder, CEO. I being asked to build engineering teams, and that's kind of how I started Density Labs, where we built teams in LATAM for companies in the US, mostly in Mexico. And then I've been building Predictably.ai, which is I'm productizing our recruiting and technical screening process. I'm also a father. I have a 10-year-old. My wife is my co-founder, so we work together closely every day. What else? I'm an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
I love going fast on the motorcycle, and I have different cars that I drive off road or on long trips. Last long trip I did was from Guadalajara to San Francisco, which is 2,500 miles or so. Uh, yeah, I mean trying to find the extremes of whatever vehicle I have on speed, distance, reliability, or just going through obstacles.
I like it.
Yeah. It's a multi. Yeah, I don't know what the answer, the question
Yeah.
was
So,
leaning
so
towards,
let's
but
let's let's
yeah.
let's let's go a little deeper. What got you into like why software? Like what was like I want to build and I want to how'd you arrive at software in the first place intellectually?
So I come from software engineering. My mom is a data scientist. My dad used to work at IBM, so he's also been in software. So that kind of helped me lean towards that. But for me, is the possibility of creating something out of nothing to solve problems that people would have of data. And then the last reason I kind of lean towards software engineer is because I wanted to work remotely. And if you have to build something physically, then you have to be there. Whereas with this, you could work from anywhere in the world, right? So yeah, and then I love problems and solving problems. So I kind of got into understanding the whys and all the layers beneath of how everything works. So I got involved on understanding how all the layers of TCP/IP work, right? How the computers talk to each other, or how they should, right? And from there, how can we build better applications, better human interfaces, right? And then I start getting more into understanding people's problems, so I could build requirements so we can build software, right? And kind of always circling around the why. Why are we building this? What is the value for the user? What is the value for the world?
Yeah. So I mean, we're not going to solve this in 10 minutes, but like this is kind of a taste of like you don't just arrive at a message and say I stand for this. Like you need to peel the layers back behind why, like what makes someone tick, who they are, their personal experience. We peeled your mom and dad's origin of how they got to their roles, and your first things that you started to build, and why, what going fast has to do with software and engineering and motorcycle. Like we could probably like surmise that 30% accuracy, maybe a message that you'd stand for. But what we do is we really get to know someone's story and who they are at a very core level, because in your world you guys love products and standing stuff up, and that's great, but like you need to connect the emotional tissue to like the functional output and to really like build the brand. And so for us, it's very important that we are able to help someone understand who they are, reflect back to them who they think they are, and then say, here's like the edge in what we see for how you need to show up in the world and tell your story and why. Because that's what's going to mobilize people around what you're trying to do. Because you need to make people feel seen, heard, understood, no matter what product you have, to be able to do that. And so for us, everything starts with a message for both the person and the company that they're building, because the company is an extension of like the core of who they are. And so if we can help someone understand that, we can build all the other layers around.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So it's about understanding their journey, and from there take the essence. So people can talk about themselves, the company they represent, or the product they represent, and then from there it connects in a much deeper level with when transmitting the message.
Correct. Yes. I mean, it starts there, right? In the essence, because if you look at like, the way we see brand or our philosophy around it, right? From that, in theory, you can build a series of content themes around it. So, you know, maybe one of your content themes is speed, shows up in motorcycles and how fast you like to build things. Maybe it's building hard things, like you like intellectually rigorous like builds, and or maybe it's like appreciating what's come before you and technological innovation. And you want to speak to these things because the business that you have is like putting out, building products for other people, service businesses that might be, building products or helping them do that. That's a function and an extension of you. So you want to communicate and see it in their eyes what you have to say, and how you got to where you were and why you do the things that you do, because that's going to resonate with them beyond you being another provider of technical services that can help them, because you're going to establish like an intellectual and an emotional connection with them by creating content with different themes that connect to the things that they want to hear. Now, if you do that really well, you're saying, okay, you're probably talking to entrepreneurs. I'm on this podcast. You're probably having a lot of other entrepreneurs who could be clients, referral partners, partnership opportunities in the future. Well, you want to then target, specific people with the content and around the message. And then from there, right, you can build whatever products, you want to sell to them. But I think what most people do is they start with the product and they try and figure out all the other stuff, after it. And I think the inverse is true. With a good brand, you can roll off any product.
Right, right. Very interesting.
We're like two opposites. We're attracting. It's great.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm coming from the technical world. So for me, all of this is, a different perspective of life, right?
Right. I think this flavor of life is pretty good, but I actually think your flavor of life is pretty good as well. So, both are necessary.
Right, right. It's we're coming to similar conclusion from different point of views, and I think that's amazing. You also support your clients with content creation, right? What is your advice so the content feels real, doesn't feel synthetic? Now with AI, everything feels kind of, that's why I'm using the word synthetic, right? Doesn't feel real anymore, right?
Yeah. Look, I think you need to be able to continue to ask really good questions to yourself and let other people engage you in good dialogue so that your mind is able to think and introspect and get things out that, you want to share. And so I love AI. I think it's the greatest tool ever. I use it all the time for so much stuff. I have also put a ton of stuff into it, prompts, writings I've done where it knows enough about me where, you know, if I give it thoughts, it can take those thoughts from 70 to 100. But, I think it's really about just letting the certain thoughts come to you that are in strategic directions or letting people ask you certain things. And those inputs create really good outputs. And using AI to add in 20% synthetic edits that, you know, you would save yourself 2 hours. And so I think AI is fantastic. And I do think people just rely on it fully without injecting themselves into it. And I do think we're moving into a world where I think AI is going to get better and better at people's voice and understanding who humans are and be able to get that out. And it's like it's your job to kind of be the is this me? And like what are the things I need to add to it? And I actually think that's okay. But that doesn't mean you should rely fully on it. And most of the content like I'm putting out personally is coming from like internally right now, in here versus what I think AI should just write for me.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm also using AI to assist on a lot of writing, but as you said, the ideas comes from me. I provide like the ideas, the guideline, the corrections. But if you ask AI a very generic question, it's going to give you a very bad answer, right? It's going to try to kind of lie through the question, right, and through the answer, and it's a blunt answer, right? But if we provide our insights and then from there we build, whether it's the articles or whatever content it is, I think it becomes a much higher quality content, right? And
Yeah,
still, as you said, still remains our voice, right?
totally. Yeah, I really like, from a technical perspective, like we're building with Graviton, it's a personal brand operating system. And the idea is in time, this is a system that learns on you and it's agentic and it prompts you and it probes you and it can get so personalized and specific. And there's other, based on the brand that like orchestration that we've built, it feeds in your audience, it gives you channel intelligence, you have agents that are doing outreach, it's bringing all these pieces together. And so, I think without core inputs that we are going to feed it and how that translates to everybody else, it would be very hard. But I think you gotta make it specific and you gotta create where the world is going. I think AI that learns and adapts on the human and makes that work, very effective. And I think that all can be done and true without diluting the human experience.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that when you provide context. It can understand better how you think, how you operate, and from there provide a much value assistant, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
What do you think? I mean, what's your take? You're the technologist here. I mean, how would you answer that for yourself?
So that's an interesting question. So I have a hard time trusting a non-deterministic system, right? Where, 1 + 1 = 2, right? You can rely on that. Now here, given an input, you don't know what the output is going to be, right? It could be good, it could be bad, right? There are ways to kind of work towards that, right? But still, um, you have a fundamentally unreliable resource that works 80-90% of the time, right? But then what do you do with the other 10 or 20 that doesn't, right? So that's what I have some trust issues with AI, but I know that that's getting better and better. At least I'm thinking it from the perspective of prevented, where I want to have zero false positives. I don't want to provide a candidate that is good, but it actually is not good because the AI had a glitch, right? And I'm an engineer, so I'm a little bit square on that sense, right? I kind of, the concept of life has to be predictable, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that is fundamentally what is causing me issues. I think it's getting better. There are ways to you can have double or triple layer agents kind of checking to each other, right? Similar to what a computer does on old Boeings. You have three computers kind of checking each other, the solution of a problem, right? Of the process. So there are ways to make it more reliable, right? But that's kind of my concerns with AI, right? And then the other issue that I was talking about is the synthetic information, right? That it's out there, right?
Woof.
Bless you. Woohoo.
So, I think I've used AI in a really like interesting way, and it's really made me excited about the future. And to like build on what you said, where I put thousands of inputs into my Chat GPT like paid plan, and it knows me so well, and I love how well it knows me. And what I do, and what, like I actually think it's like I actually trust. I don't want to get in trouble for saying this. I actually trust a lot of the synthetic outputs it gives me because I've given it so many good inputs. Inputs have been hundreds of transcripts, hundreds of pieces of writing, document access to my Google Drive and all my documents and things I've up like. And so what I think is so interesting about that now is I'm saying, okay, here's a transcript, write an email that outlines the follow-ups, that outlines like this in a strategic way. My thinking, I just have to be creative in like the prompt. And I have to be a little creative in how I edit it. And like it's exactly what I would say, but spend so much more time doing. And I'm like, well, this is fantastic. You know what I mean? And so like I actually believe in a world where when you give something enough inputs, you have a system that learns on you, and the outputs, whether they're synthetic or not, are actually like they're just better than what you would do. And so if you imagine that for the future of content and how we share, I'd be totally okay if AI kind of, our Graviton's system, and it prompts me and it says, "Hey, how are you feeling today?" And I write, "Shitty, I'm really sad about XYZ happening." And it gives me a probing question, and I give it a few sentences, and it whips up an amazing post because it's tapped so deep into my emotional sentiment. I'd be like, "Hell yeah, like, you just helped me make sense of something going on," that and I'd be okay with that personally. Other people, maybe not, but, anyways, I'm excited about the future of this because I actually think it can be done ethically for good, even if there's synthetic information that's brought to life because it knows you so well.
That's a very interesting thought. I haven't think it that way because yes, it does know us very well. It's going to be able to kind of predict what we're going to say, or kind of give us the information that we're looking for. And now that you're mentioning, I'm realizing that my ChatGPT paid plan also is giving better and better responses based on what I type it. That's very interesting. Yeah. One of the exercises I did at the beginning of the year is I asked the prompt, given everything you know about me, can you generate an image that will represent me? Which is a very interesting exercise. You should do it, but it shows you can see in a single picture your whole history of everything you kind of prompt into it. And that shows how much it knows about us. The other side of that is that works great until it doesn't, right? And I can give you an example. On the Apple Watch, it tries to kind of figure out if you're walking, if you're not walking, if you're, so we walk, we go to the, we go to take a bus, and then the watch says, "Are you still walking? Are you still walking?" Right? You stop walking, and then it kind of doesn't realize yet that you stop walking. So it tries to be smart, but it kind of failed into it, right? Rather than being able to say, "Well, I walk, I take the bus, or I take a car, or whatever I do," right? A much more simple system, right? So maybe that's an overcomplicated, piece of technology that doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's not all figured out, to your point, and I think there's use cases where it's not gonna know everything, and at the same time, it's an interesting future we're running into.
Right, right. To your point, I think that you were talking about that there's also, or we were talking about that there's also synthetic content. I think that you can use anything for good or evil, right? You can use a hammer to build a house or kill somebody, right?
Yeah.
So I think the same thing happens with the GPT, right? You can use it to create to assist you in creating great content, or people will use it for just creating fake and synthetic content that doesn't add too much value, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to build on this, like, a step further, yeah, I wrote an article. I was, in Washington, DC over Christmas, and I wrote an article, and it was called "My AI Bar Fight," like a bar fight. So the backstory is I was in DC. I was at a restaurant. I was waiting for my partner in the business, Blair, to meet me. And I sat down, and there's this girl to my right, and to my left, there was this guy. And I was on a call, like talking about taxes with some girl on my team and just clearing a few things up. And to my left, this guy starts talking about like a real estate marketing tech company. And so when I got off the call, I looked at him and I was like, "Tell me what you're up to." Because it's interesting, kind of for Graviton, what we're doing, my ears definitely perked up. And he's on a similar issue in like a very different way in a much different niche. But clearly, like, people are thinking about this world. And so we had a little chat. And then the girl to my right, she was basically said, "So I guess you're in tech." And I said, like, you could probably say so. I mean, elements for sure. And he's like, "Well, what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, this is what I do." And I was like, "What do you do?" She's like, "Oh, I do like brand marketing and like public affairs. We have a bunch of like public government type of clients." And so then I said to her, "Well, what do you think about this tooling and AI?" And she goes, "Well, I think it's going to help make people lose their jobs. And I think that like it's takes out like the human like spirit of the work." And I'm thinking to myself, like, "You're absolutely nuts." Like, I think it's like, she's like, "Well, what if people lose jobs at my company? And like, what if it's like unethical?" And I was like, if you have taste and you know how to like drive these systems to create the output that you want, like, isn't that a much better use of your time, energy, and effort than like filling in all the lines in a certain way that you think is good? I mean, like, we're truly headed to a world where like the old way is going to be fully replaced, and the people are going to need to adapt into the ways that are faster. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And so anyways, we went through the conversation, and I basically gave her my point of view, and she gave me her point of view. And she basically said, "Well, I probably need to go get married and go read books and write on a farm because like my job's going to be out and it's going to be doomsday." And I'm like, "Great." I said, "I hope you find a rich husband." And then, I said goodbye, and that was that. But like, I think this is very ethical. I think it's the the way of the future, and I do think that if you can scrap all these individual components together, I mean, you're seeing these AI companies go to like 10, 20, $50 million fast. And they've clearly scrapped together things in a very useful way and have good growth systems. And they brought together disparate parts to make something incredibly scalable. And I find that like really intellectually interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with any revolution, there's going to be people that are going to lose their job or because their job become obsolete, right? But I think that with any revolution, we're going to see new jobs coming up, right? So I don't think that necessarily AI is going to take a lot of jobs. It's going to replace them. It's going to change them into something different, right? We used to have people on elevators, riding the elevator up and down, right? Eventually, that was replaced with automation, right? Um, so I think that people need to learn how to leverage AI so they can have better jobs in the future, right? Rather than just trying to fight it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so anyways, I like where the world's going. It's good for people like me who are great at being generalist. So,
Right. Right. And I think that the core skills are going to be much more necessary than before,
what do
right?
you think are the
Like,
most important skills that we have moving forward?
that's a very good question. You do very good questions.
I know I should be the host. Come on.
You should have a podcast, which you do.
I do. We've only, yeah, yeah. I would honestly prefer asking the questions more than speaking. So, it's my probably happy place. But keep going. Tell me what are the core skills.
Yeah. So I think that the core skills is being able to understand, on software engineer, we talk about architecture, we talk about designing solutions, right? So it's basically building the strategy of how to solve the problems, right? In software engineer, we build these abstractions of problems, right? So, tell me a problem, tell me expected behavior. As a software engineer, I can build something that is going to be efficient, fast, scalable, and we're going to be able to add more features for moving forward, right? So having engineers that understand how to do that is going to be much more needed than before. Now, then on the other hand, all the lower complexity tasks like coding syntax, writing code. Now we have AI that can assist us in a lot of that. So we can have agents that build code for us. So instead of writing code, we just need to read code, verify that it's what we want, and then just accept it, right? So this concept of human in the middle, right, process. So I think that being able to have that criteria is what I call core skills. I'm talking from the perspective of software engineering. I believe that similar things are going to happen on branding. It's going to happen on PR. It's going to happen on content. Right? Understanding the strategy. What are the things that we need to do so we can provide better instructions to the agents, so the agents can then do the menial work, if you like, right?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, like I could argue that you're using code in a synthetic way. You're setting up the system and it's just pumping out a bunch of code and you like it. All right, we're gonna strap it in and make it go. Like I do the same thing with writing. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like you set up the system to orchestrate the outputs that you need. Like to me, that's smart. I mean, you're in theory creating synthetic code like I create synthetic writing. But
Yeah.
I'm the final point of approval as you are with the code. Like, I think that's a great place to be, and a strategic place to be that has leverage.
Well,
So I
well, when I'm
agree.
talking about synthetic code, synthetic things is this idea of hyper personalization on marketing, right? Or that simulates that we know the audience or the target, whoever it is, right? Even though we might not, right? And then I see a lot of content that is generated that you read it and it's basically the same. You see the similar content everywhere, and it's basically the same content regurgitated over and over and over. That's what I'm calling synthetic.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was just trying to, like, pair side by side our worlds. But yes, I completely agree.
That's what I think. It's lower quality of content, lower quality of relationships, right? I've seen, I've been to many events where it's so transactional, right? Unlike this conversation where we can have very interesting thoughts in a much more meaningful way and have a deeper conversation, right? And I think this is the opposite of synthetic, which is the definition I just invented.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are things do you see in the future of how we could leverage AI a little bit more?
Well, on one hand, if you need to build a personal brand that is truly personalized, I think before we know it, we're gonna have software that helps us spin up a business of one, make six
Right.
figures doing it, and gives you all the tools to do it in a way that you've never had before. So I think that's a future I'm excited to build on a pretty large scale. The second one would be, I mean, I think it's pretty cool, like being in San Francisco, everything I'm learning about the longevity and health space. I mean, before we know it, I have a couple of friends working on something similar. You take a few drops of blood, get 100 plus biomarkers. Okay, get your diet, nutrition, link that diet, nutrition to the kinds of food supplements and things that you should be eating, and then to the types of workouts that you should be doing. But it's all comes from, like, the inside, and it's, like, chain and linked together. That'd be really cool. We're not that far off from, like, that world, and, like, what's happening is those worlds are being built. You have the guys in the lab creating the biomarker stuff. You have the longevity people creating, like, all the longevity products. You have where you order food from, and you just link it all together and one-stop shop to get your, biomarkers, get your food stuff, understand your workouts, and, like, have that all come together. Like, so many people are building in that space right now, but they're only able to serve a super wealthy market. In the next 5 years, I have to imagine, like, the price and cost of that is gonna go down significantly, and just like personal branding 5 years ago, like, this stuff was, like, hard to do. Like, you had these platforms, people, like, everyone's like, "Oh, I should do this now," and, like, what are the easier ways to do it? But there was a market prior that paid a lot of money to do this. And I think we're seeing that right now in this longevity space, but no one scrapped it all together. That's actually where I think the opportunity is. The democratization of like longevity and the linking between all the parts, because people are working on a lot of these parts in silos.
Right. Once we are able to connect them, it's going to be a whole different world.
Right. Yeah. Like I literally want one place to go. Here's my blood. Okay. Give me my food. Give me this workouts that I should be doing that are good for me. And, let me set this to a baseline of like where I want to be with my health. Like, I think, like, that's a cool world that's being built, or, like, the planets are being built. The world hasn't been, like, or the atmosphere isn't fully there yet. Like, there's a lot, what else? I don't know.
So,
Okay, you ask me, I don't know. What how would you answer that one?
um, I think that uh, do you remember the calculators? The calculators, the used to have these sliding bars to do the calculations before the electronic calculators were invented, right? The people would develop the skills of calculating with these sliding rulers, right? So eventually the calculators became so fast that the input became the issue, right? You get a calculator on your phone and you type something. Now, what is the bottleneck? On the input and the output, on the screen and the typing, right? Typing on the phone sucks compared to the computer, right? So I think that being able to increase that bandwidth is going to be an amazing thing, right? Because then we will be able to interact with agents through a mind computer interface that is going to be much faster than whatever our fingers can do, right?
Yeah. It's gonna be a big world. You're gonna be building in it.
Yes, yes. I mean, my concern with that is getting ads on our dreams, right?
I mean, I don't know if I'd even have a concern with that. Wouldn't that be good? Like, if I had something that read my dreams and it fed me ads to help me have the life I want, like, it's like dream acceleration. It'd be great.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that,
Sure. Yeah. It's cool.
but I understand. Yeah, I mean, there are benefits of having targeted ads, but also, the knowledge that the algorithms know so much about us. It's kind of concerning for me, right? On the privacy side, right?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So we're running out of time, but I think it's amazing what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to see where you're taking it next. Any final remarks before we wrap it up?
No, just let me know next time you're in San Francisco with your family and, hang out. And no, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. You've actually helped me verbalize things I've never even thought about. So great conversation.